At the Battle of Mbwila or Battle of Mbwila or Battle of Ulanga on October 29, 1665, Portuguese forces defeated the forces of the Kingdom of Congo and decapitated King Antonio I of Congo, also called Mvita Nakanga. Origins of the war. Although Congo and Portugal had been trading partners and participated in a cultural exchange during the 16th century, the establishment of a Portuguese colony in Luanda in 1575, Portugal occupied Luanda without the permission, affected this relationship. Congo initially assisted Portugal in Angola, sending an army to rescue the Portuguese governor Paulo Dias de Nove when his war against the nearby African kingdom of Ndongo failed in 1579. Paulo Dias of Nu was arrested for almost 5 years by Kilwangi, king of Ndongo, Angola, federal state of the Kingdom of Congo. But subsequently, as Portugal became stronger, it began to press harder, and in 1622 severed even the cautiously friendly relationship of the earlier period when a large Portuguese army invaded southern Congo and defeated the local forces at the Battle of Mbwila. Pedro II, king of Congo at the time, responded by personally leading a force at the Battle of Mbwila, crushing the invasion. He then wrote to the Dutch Estates General, proposing an alliance with the Dutch to drive the Portuguese out of Angola altogether. This alliance did not finally come to fruition until 1641 when Dutch forces took Luanda and were joined by an army from Congo, forcing the Portuguese to withdraw into the interior. However, they were not able to finish the Portuguese, and as a result the Portuguese eventually forced the Dutch out in 1648. In the years following the Dutch withdrawal, Angolan governors sought to obtain revenge against Congo and to support the slave trade with a highly aggressive policy. Included in this policy were attacks on the zone of small, semi-independent states called Dembos that separated Angola from Congo. Both Congo and Angola claimed authority over the Dembos. King Antonio I, an aggressive monarch in his own right, was negotiating with Spain to renew an anti-Portuguese alliance, and also sent ambassadors into the Dembos areas to persuade them to join Congo against the Portuguese, promising Spanish aid. In 1665, one of these small kingdoms, Mbwila, underwent a succession struggle and the various factions appealed to Congo and Angola for aid. Both sides responded with armies. The core of the Portuguese force, commanded by Luís Lopes de Sequeira, was 450 musketeers and 2 light artillery pieces. There were soldiers from the Portuguese colony of Brazil, including some of African and Native American origin, as well as Mbingala and other African forces numbering about 15,000. The Congo army included a large number of peasant archers, probably about 15,000, some 5,000 heavy infantry equipped with shields and swords, and a musket regiment of 380 men, 29 of them Portuguese, led by Pedro Dias de Cabral. Both armies were operating at some distance from their main bases. They had marched for days to reach the battlefield, along the valley of the Ulanga River just south of the capital of Mbwila. Steep hills and the river defined the east side of the battlefield, and lower ridges the west. The Portuguese forces took up positions between the two, with their African forces deployed on the flanks and the musketeers forming a diamond-shaped formation in the center, anchored by their artillery. The Mbingala forces were held in reserve. Antonio's army advanced into the Portuguese formation with a vanguard, followed by 3 divisions of his heavy infantry and the archers on the flanks. The Duke of Bengo commanded the reserve. In the initial stages of the battle, the Congolese archers swept most of the African archers of the Portuguese forces from the field and then launched attacks against the Portuguese musketeers, supported by their own heavy infantry and musketeers. In spite of heavy fighting, the Congolese were unable to break the Portuguese formation and Antonio was killed in the final attempt. Most of the Congo forces broke following the king's death. The survivors were only able to withdraw thanks to skillful rearguard action by the Duke of Bengo and the reserves. More than 400 of Congo's heavy infantry were killed in the encounter and many more of the archers. Along with these losses was the royal chaplain, the mixed-race Capuchin priest Francisco de São Salvador Manuel Robredo in secular life. King Antonio's young son of 7 years was captured. After the battle, the head of the king or Manicongo was buried with ceremony by the Portuguese in the chapel of Our Lady of Nazareth situated on the Bay of Luanda, and the crown and scepter of Congo were sent to Lisbon as trophies. Aftermath: Portugal obtained an act of vassalage from Isabel, the region of Mbwila, but was unable to exercise any real authority over the region once their forces had withdrawn. In 1693 they had to return to attempt to subdue the region again. The primary result in Congo was that the absence of an immediate heir spun the country into civil war. This civil war, which raged for half a century, led to Congo's decentralization and fundamental changes, leading to Congolese historians, even in 1700, regarding the battle as a decisive turning point in their country's history. After the battle, many people including nobles and members of the royal family were captured. Some of these were enslaved and crossed the sea to the Portuguese colony of Brazil and maybe other places in the Americas. It's unknown what happened to most of them. But at some point in 1630, the sons of Princess Aquiltune, who led a battalion during the battle, Ganga Zumba, his brother Ganga Zona and their sister Sabina, appeared enslaved in a Engenho sugar cane plantation, in the captaincy of Pernambuco in northeast Brazil, where they led a rebellion, escaped and later formed their own kingdom of Quilombo dos Palmares, a Marum nation who controlled large areas of northeast Brazil during the Dutch-Portuguese War. Sabina bore a son, Zumbi, Zambi was his original name, who after being captured raised in a church and then escaped, succeeded his uncle and became the king of Palmares and leader of the rebellion, until being killed in 1695 by the Bandeirantes after their kingdom was destroyed. His son Kamwanga succeeded him in lead the rebellion, but after this it's unknown what happened to them or their lineage. Zumbi today is considered a national hero in Brazil. It was not easy for Portugal to evacuate thousands of people from Africa to serve as slaves in America. Long resistance struggles were fought against colonization, which included senior military and political investments that combined oppression, violence, and alliances with local chiefs. The trajectory of Nzinga Mbandi is an example of how the Central African chiefs faced the Portuguese forward. Skilled warrior, political and military strategist, Nzinga was a charismatic leader, a queen who spent her life fighting and died without ever being caught. Born in 1582, daughter of the 8th Ngola, which would derive the name Angola, title page nobleman of the Kingdom of Ndongo. The Portuguese had initiated colonization from Luanda 7 years before and were gaining the inside with the construction of prisons, military fortifications in the course of the Kwanza River, which housed the slave traders, and the organization of trade shows where the main goods were enslaved people. They also created a system of subjugation of chiefs, autonomous local chiefs who paid tribute to Ngola in exchange for military and spiritual protection. After the Portuguese invasion, they were baptized and declared themselves loyal to the crown. This condition included several commitments, providing baculamentos, taxes paid usually slaves, giving way to government troops, allowing kinds fairs and markets in its territory, and contribute slaves to be soldiers of the Black War, the platoon that fought along the Portuguese. The generalized war, and with it the climate of instability. The Sobadores intensified attacks on neighboring villages to pay off your debts with the Portuguese because prisoners captured in war were enslaved. At the sign of any move perceived as unfaithful, the Portuguese government invaded the Sobadores and killed their leaders, replacing them with allies' bosses. It was in this context of Portuguese penetration into the Kingdom of Ndongo, moved by the slave trade, which grew Nzinga Mbandi. In the reign of his brother Ngola Mbandi, worsened the tension between the local and the conquerors. In 1617, the governor of Angola, Luís Mendes de Vasconcelos, invaded the Kingdom of Ndongo to build the prison Mbaka, a few miles from Calabash, housing the Ngola. The result was an intense war, the end of which Ngola, loser, took refuge on the island of Kindonga, on the Kwanza River. In 1622, João Correia de Souza took office and decided to seek the Ngola to restore peace, once the scene of war paralyzed the slave markets. That's when Nzinga came on the scene. Ngola Mbandi sent her older sister as an ambassador to negotiate peace with the Portuguese. At the hearing with the governor, she impressed everyone by his intelligence and diplomatic skill. Defended the maintenance of the independence of Ndongo and pay no tribute to the Portuguese crown, but proved open to trade. Understanding that peace with the Portuguese passed through Christian baptism, accepted the sacrament, was named Ana de Souza, whose godfather the governor himself. For his part, the Portuguese undertook to effect the removal of the prison Mbaka. Political strategy on behalf of African resistance or conversion to Catholicism, baptism Nzinga Mbandi generates controversy among scholars today. Political strategy on behalf of African resistance or conversion to Catholicism, baptism Nzinga Mbandi generates controversy among scholars today. The agreement, however, was not fulfilled by one or governor or his successors. The situation led to the weakening of political Ngola Mbandi, who died on the island of Kindonga in 1624, in circumstances that remain a mystery to the historiography of Angola. Nzinga took possession of the regalia and assumed the throne of Ndongo. The new queen was associated with possible liberation of the people Mbundo, predominant ethnicity in Ndongo kingdom. The increasing leakage Kimbaras, slaves who manned the prisons or were given by the chiefs to compose the Black War, Luces weakened the troops, while the army strengthened Nzinga. Taking advantage of this favorable context, the Queen launched a campaign anti-Lusitana, forming and leading a confederation of disaffected with colonization. Won the support of chiefs who had already overwhelmed, and powerful bosses who did not belong to Ndongo, as Ndembo Mbwila. Nzinga capture and reduce it to obedience became one of the main objectives of the Portuguese government. In 1626, the governor of Angola, Fernão de Souza, engineered a political coup for the Quiluanhar, a vassal of the Portuguese, assumed the throne. Nzinga took refuge on the island of Kindonga and got rid of the siege wisely, using the geography of the place, moving the various islands of the Kwanza River. When Luce's troops finally cornered in the Kindonga, she sent their ambassadors to inform that he was willing to surrender and overwhelm. To this, however, asked for a 3-day truce. After the deadline, the Portuguese realized that they had fallen into a scam. Nzinga was already far away. The queen was then feared to seek protection with Jaga, nomadic warriors who were organized in Colombos, camps that moved according to the needs of war, with strict hierarchy and strict military discipline. Nzinga received the most important women's title in Quilombo, Timbanza, assuming functions essential rituals. Political consciousness printed flocks, which had hitherto lived wandering, theft and practicing without fouling the lines. Under the command of Nzinga, the Colombos were included in the resistance front against the alien threat. The awesome firepower that Nzinga was able to mobilize together to Jaga was crucial to remain free and winning the Portuguese several times. Around 1630, Nzinga took the kingdom Matamba, eastern Ndongo, evocative land of their ancestors and traditionally ruled by women. Was provided Queen Matamba she knew the Dutch invasion in Angola in 1641. Here was an opportunity to establish new alliance to undermine the Portuguese presence in the region. Nzinga approached the invaders, and together they created an important trade route that connected Luanda, now Dutch possession, to Matamba, exchanging slaves for European goods, especially firearms. Was fundamental to the oligarchy of Rio de Janeiro restore the dominance of the slave market in Angola. This was achieved in 1648 at the initiative of Salvador de Sá, who organized troops formed by Indians and pioneers to expel the Dutch. The Lusitanian victory had the direct effect of weakening the Queen Nzinga. His 2 sisters were captured and held hostage by the Portuguese. Kifunge eventually murdered in Masingano, accused of espionage. Macambo, caught in Luanda, used as a political weapon to force the surrender of Nzinga. Pope Gregory XV, with the aim of reducing the power that had accumulated Iberian crowns with colonization, created in 1622 Propaganda Fide, to spread the faith that allowed the trip to Central Africa to missionaries who had no relations with the Portuguese crown. Among them were the Capuchins, who arrived in the region in the 1640s. Nzinga saw this religious another possibility of making new European allies who were not linked to the Portuguese government. By the Italian Capuchin Antonio Guida, Nzinga returned to Catholicism in 1656, denying the Gentile rites and accepting the faith of Christ. The conversion to Christianity was an exit strategy because when already old, she knew that the cross would be the fastest way to peace and to achieve the return of Macambo, his sister indicated to succeed Matamba, finally liberated by the Portuguese in 1657. The leader Matamba died in December 1663, with more than 80 years buried according to Christian rites. The Mbundo people venerated as the immortal queen that never surrendered and never accepted submission to invaders. His fame crossed the Atlantic and arrived in Brazil. Here, named Ginga or Jinga is evoked in capoeira, maracatu and kingados in multiple ways, as a warrior who deceives opponents, enemy of the Christian court, venerable ancestor of Angola.